Okay, so when it comes to tension in that upper back, back angles of your shoulders area, there really are several areas that we could hit, but we're going to talk about three of them. One of them being rhomboids, second one your middle traps or trapezius, followed by the rotator cuff that's on the back end of your shoulder blades. So these areas tend to be those areas where when we find ourselves rounded forward for long periods of time or stressed out, having our shoulders hiked up, where there seems to be a lot of tension that's stored. We don't need to get into the mechanisms of what stored tension would look like, but what I want to talk about specifically is how we can get some sort of a mobilization or a stretch on all of these areas, and then always following it up with some sort of strength work. And the reason for that is that when we do mobility work, and then we go back to that sitting posture, we go back to normal life, without reinforcing what we just created, those results tend to be short-term, and many of you have experienced that with things like massage, manual therapy at your physical therapist or chiropractor's office. These are short-term effects oftentimes. Now, what can happen when we start to do strength work right after mobility work is that we tend to, as I always tell my clients, hit that save button. So imagine editing a document or something and basically Xing out of that document on a computer without ever hitting the save button. You're going to try to return to that document at a later time and realize, oh my gosh, all the work that I did was lost. It's a very, very similar fashion for mobility work with our soft tissue, meaning muscles and tendons. So what we want to make sure is that even though we give some love with the following techniques that we're going to do, we want to always follow up with a little bit of strength work to try to hit the save button in our brains and in our bodies so that we remember that those muscles are supposed to be used and not stretched out and inactive. Let's try these out. All right, so my favorite, my go-to tool for trying to get some of this tension out of the upper portions of the backs, the back end of our shoulders, is, believe it or not, to use a lacrosse ball. Now, a lot of people who've tried this, they associate lacrosse balls with torture, right? It's not going to be torture, but a lot of times these tissues, in order to let these things actually relax, we have to feed them a little bit of pressure, all right? And so a lacrosse ball does a trick. Other things you can think about are a tennis ball, a yoga tune-up ball, something that has something of a similar diameter to this. Now, I will say the firmer ball that you go with, the more aggressive that this feels. So three things that we're gonna do here. Number one, we are going to find the tender areas in between our shoulder blades. For many of you, that's not gonna be hard. We're talking about this stuff in between our shoulder blades, and easy to find would be putting a ball back there. Take a guess. I'm going to put up some anatomy right here, and what we're going to do is try to pin one of those sensitive spots to the wall. Now, I'm using a little bit of body pressure to do this, and I'm leaning and I'm finding one of those spots. You'll notice my elbows are in front of my body, and when I find one of those spots off on my left side in this case, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pin it down, put as much pressure as I can tolerate. I'm going to take this arm and reach across my shoulder towards my opposite shoulder. And we're gonna do that about 6, 7, 8 times. And what you're gonna notice as you're doing this is that the tension increases a lot as you start to move your arm. And really the reason is that the tissues behind the ball, the stuff that you're putting pressure into, is lengthening and shortening as we're doing this movement. That's what we want compared to just rolling around and just putting pressure on these sensitive spots. So 6, 7, 8 repetitions reaching up or over to the side. And then I would also follow this with reaching up. So I would take a straight arm, lift right in front of your body, up towards the ceiling. Again, as much pressure as you can handle. And that's what we're looking to do, all right? And of course, we're gonna have many, many spots back between our shoulder blades that are tight and tender. So I would encourage you, pick 5 or 6 spots at a time. Go after each of them and see if you notice a difference right after. Okay, so while there's a shoulder blade component to a lot of these muscles, which is why we reached across and up towards the ceiling, there's also a neck component to many of the muscles in here. So what we want to make sure that we do is we also get some head movement involved to try to stretch out and lengthen some of that stuff there. So same exact concept, finding those spots in between your spine and shoulder blade. Search around for it, investigate, see where it's at. Once you find it, what I want you to do now, chin to your chest. Chin to your chest, ear towards your shoulder. Feel free to kind of explore some of this motion. What you might find is that looking down increases the stretch, whereas looking to the side or tilting your head doesn't make a change. Feel free to explore this. There's no written rules for this necessarily, other than just give it, again, 6-7 repetitions and then move on to another spot. Okay, the last thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure that we give a little bit of tissue love to the posterior end of our rotator cuff. This is stuff that is specifically right on the back end of our shoulder blade. So we're moving away from the stuff in between our shoulder blades, moving more towards right behind our shoulder. So again, we're gonna do the same concept, but instead of being square to the wall and shoulder blades pinned here, we're simply gonna turn a little bit towards the side that we're going after. So same concept, ball, right in some of that tissue there, a little bit of body weight pressure, and you notice that my body is essentially tilted 30-45 degrees or so away from the wall. And once I find a spot, that would be one. I always know it for me because it makes my eyes twitch. And once we find that spot, you've got a couple of options here. One, we can simply add in some slow movement, trying to stay kind of parallel to the wall. Again, 6-7 repetitions is perfect. Number two, what you could do is work a little bit of rotation, because we know that rotator cuff is involved in shoulder rotation. So we can try to pin that elbow to the wall, add some rotation upward, add some rotation downward. Again, the point of this is to introduce movement and pressure into some of these muscles that are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, as the rest of us are with this whole quarantine situation. Again, I would keep all these movements very rhythmic, slow, controlled, and notice the difference in how you feel afterwards. We're going to move on to how we can easily hit the save button and do some strength reinforcement work right after we do some of these mobilizations. Okay, so now we're going to move into a really, really easy way to just reinforce and hit the save button on that short-term change that we just created with the ball. Since we're already at the wall, I'm going to share with you a really, really easy one to do right at the wall here. So basically all we're going to do is we're going to get our forehead in contact with the wall, probably put your toes up against the wall as well. And what I want you to do is I want you to focus on two things. Number one, making sure that your rib cage is locked down. Okay, so what this is going to do is prevent us from compensating with some of the angles in our back and arching while we're doing this movement. So you're going to try to use your abs to pin those ribs over top of your hips. Second, what we're going to do is we're going to have our arms essentially right up against the wall here, and our goal is to equally lift our forearms and our elbows away from the wall in a horizontal position. This looks like a row. If you were on the ground, it would look like W's, like you're making a W out of your body. But here's what we're going to do, and we're going to try to do this 12 to 15 times. Ribs locked down, forehead is in contact, and my goal is to equally lift them away and give myself a big squeeze between the shoulder blades. What I don't want to see is only elbows coming forward or only wrists coming forward. Your goal is to try to have them both come at the same time, and it should look something a bit more like that. I hope this was helpful for you. These are really, really easy tips. It's just 3 ways to use a ball at home to get some of the tension out, and then always remembering to hit the save button on this. Please don't forget to move and to get active and to stay as healthy as you possibly can, even while we are staying at home. It's super, super important for your health, not just your mental health, but also your tissue health, which I really believe in us having much of the ability to take care of our tissues on our own, because movement is the best medicine. Please check out my telehealth offerings if you're looking for some specific guidance on an issue. I would love it if you would get in touch with me. We are doing telehealth with all of our active clients and trying to offer some to new clients if there's a need for it. We're opening up spots for this as we need to. So please reach out to me, www.limitless.physio/telehealth. I would love to be able to help you out in more of a custom tailored manner to your needs.